Good evening, everyone. My name is Kyle Cooper, and I am the newly elected president of the Chicago Police Board. I want to welcome you all to the December 21st public meeting and call it to order. We thank CAN-TV for covering this meeting. It is being broadcast on Channel 27 and live streamed at cantv.org and on the CAN-TV app. Board members Carr Favors and Dorley are unable to attend this meeting in person due to medical reasons, and we wish them well, but they are able to attend remotely. And so at this point, I would ask if there is a motion to permit them to do so.
So moved, Paula Wolf.
Second, Mariah Cusick.
All in favor, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. In addition to the members of the police board, we have the following city officials here with us this evening. Superintendent of Police, Larry Snelling. Chief Administrator of COPA, Andrea Kirsten. Deputy Inspector General for Public Safety, Tobara Richardson. Chief of the Chicago Police Department's Bureau of Internal Affairs, Yolanda Talley. Sergeant Sung Cho from Chicago Police Department's Office of Legal Affairs, and the Police Board's Executive Director, Max Caproni. Before we proceed to the items on the meeting agenda, I just want to take a moment first to introduce myself. My name is, again, Kyle Cooper. I'm a lifelong Chicago resident, and I'm very much looking forward to working with the members of the board and the other members of law enforcement, but also the community on issues of public safety. And I thank you for being here today. Just to give you a little bit of background about my appointment, the mayor, the city council approved my appointment to the board on December 13th, and I look forward to serving in this role for the years to come. We will now proceed to the items on the meeting agenda, and we will have time at the end of the meeting for public comments. So at this time, I would ask if there is a motion to approve the draft minutes of the board's public and closed meeting held on November 16th.
Paula Wolf, so moved.
Mariah Cusick, second.
All in favor, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
The motion passes. We will next move to a report on the minutes and recordings. Just so everyone is aware, earlier today, the board, as required by the Illinois Open Meetings Act, met and considered minutes and recordings of all past closed meetings to determine whether the need for confidentiality still exists. The board members unanimously agreed that it continues to be necessary to keep confidential the recordings of its past closed meetings and portions of the minutes. The board does, however, make publicly available portions of its closed meeting minutes online. These minutes are included in the blue book that is posted on the board's website in advance of every public meeting. And now, just to give everybody a schedule of the meetings for 2024, we'd like to let you know that the schedule of the board's regular monthly meetings for 2024 have been set, and they will be posted shortly on the board's website, which is chicago.gov/policeboard. As in past years, the board will meet on the third Thursday of the month, and the meetings will begin as they have today at 7:30 p.m. The next public meeting will take place on January 18th at 7:30 p.m., and the meeting will be held here, which is at the Chicago Public Safety Headquarters. Now, just for a little bit about the closed meetings, the police board meets in executive session to consider various matters. Those discussions are closed to the public as authorized by Section 2C1, Section 4, Section 11, and Section 21 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act. Information on matters discussed in executive sessions is included in the minutes of the meetings posted on the board's website. Is there a motion to close a series of future executive sessions as authorized by these sections of the Open Meetings Act?
So moved, Paula Wolf.
Second, Mariah Cusick.
All in favor, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. At this time, we are pleased to have with us this evening Eileen Robinson. She's the Assistant Director of the Chicago Police Department's Crime Victims Service Unit. Ms. Robinson will be giving a presentation on services to support victims of officer-involved domestic violence situations.
Good evening, everybody. I want to thank you for giving me, my children tell me I'm loud enough without this now. I want to thank the board for giving me some time this evening to talk to you a bit about officer-involved domestic violence. I've worked with you for the past 24 years or so, but this is my first official entree, so I'm excited to be here. The Chicago Police Department responds to an average of 570 calls for domestic violence service a day. 570 calls for domestic violence service a day. That's no higher or lower than any other large city when you're comparing apples to apples. That also includes calls for service for our own department members. Both
Ms.
as a-
Robinson, would you mind pausing for just 1 second while we work
Sure.
through a technical issue?
I'm sorry, would you mind using the microphone, just so the people like.
The floor is all yours.
No, I'm sorry. I got a little bit of power there. It's no different than any other large city when you're comparing similar numbers to other numbers, but also includes calls for service for officers who are both victims, offenders, and sometimes victim-offender pairs. It would be unrealistic for us to expect that our officers, who sometimes have the same stressors, grew up in the same homes, and are subject to the same myths, to expect anything less. We hope for better, and we're working toward better, but the reality is they're still members of our community, and we still need to be available to provide service to not only hold them accountable, but for me, who studies victimology, to be sure that we're there to provide supportive services every step of the way with victims of officer-involved domestic violence. It's important to know about our services. They're extremely unique. We're the most unique program in the country. Folks try and duplicate it and replicate it. It's an expensive program, and no one has been able to do it yet. So it's a proud accomplishment for the Chicago Police Department. We meet our victims where they're at. So what does that mean? If a victim says, I want to hold the offender wholly accountable, I want to go through the entire system, we walk with them every step of the way through that process. If the victim says, I don't want to be involved in this at all, I don't want the offender to be held accountable, then we also support that victim in making that decision. We make sure they're informed in both situations of what that might look like. But again, we're going to walk that path with them, whatever that decision they make is, after we've provided them with enough information and answered any questions they have. Someone can say today, I want to hold my offender accountable, and 2 days later, sometimes they change their mind, and they change their mind back again. So it's not always a linear path. But regardless of the path they choose, we're with them every step of the way, and we empower them to make the decision that they want that's best for themselves and their family. I tell you that we meet victims where they're at, and I mean that literally. So we will meet victims out in community, out in the suburbs, whatever time of day, and as well as we have covert offices. So we have a new superintendent. He probably doesn't know I have a covert office, but he does now. So anyway, that's how covert it is. So we always want to be aware that we need to keep this subset of victims. And I always say there's no specialized victims. There's just victims with special circumstances, to make sure that we are addressing every need that they may have to make them comfortable and to make them safe, and to be sure that we are providing them exemplary service to help them make the best decision that's best for them. What are some of the services we offer? Starting off the bat, we're looking at crisis counseling. All of a sudden, somebody went from maybe having what's going on in the relationship kept to themselves, but not only is it public now, it's in a public document. Maybe friends and family are aware, work may be aware. So we're doing a lot of that, what needs to happen immediately to address your concerns, to answer your questions, to help you be safe. A lot of the language that we use sometimes is unfamiliar if you're not familiar with the system. There's a lot of myths out there. So we're spending a lot of time initially with that victim to try and address any questions or concerns they may have. Medical or legal advocacy. Do they need medical attention? What happened when they went to the hospital? Do they need us to go with them to the hospital? Do we need to go to court with them? Are we filing an emergency order of protection? Are they seeking to get a divorce or temporary custody of children? What does that look like? To all of a sudden find yourself in this really large system, oftentimes having to represent yourself, can really be overwhelming when you've really just lost that sense of self of that relationship. So again, we're there with them every step of the way. Some of our victims need to go to shelter, and sometimes they need to go to shelter far outside the city. So oftentimes we're trying to make those arrangements and then get them to that place of safety covertly. Make sure that if they're bringing children with them, what is it that we need to do for those children's educational needs? So there's a lot of moving pieces involved when we're working with victims, getting them emotionally, educationally, and physically to a place of safety. The service you might be most familiar with is a meeting such as this evening. So sometimes we're going to be here sitting with a victim, sometimes just to be present, to have a friendly body next to them as they're sitting in this room where their stories may be told in some form or fashion to strangers, essentially, in front of this long, kind of stoic-looking board of members. Sometimes we have victims who do not want to come to the board meeting, and I'll come to the meeting, I'll listen to what was said, and I'll call them afterwards to report out. So we also like to give them that option of having information as soon as possible, but not necessarily having to be present on site. There's a few new services that I want to mention to you that we offer through our program. One is we provide services to victims of officer sexual misconduct. That service now is about 2 years old. Same services are available also in our covert offices. We also offer services to victims who are non-targets of search warrants, is the second new program. And then the third new program, kind of under this umbrella of crime victim services, is we provide service to families of persons who die in police custody. So our program is growing in both services offered, and I'm really excited to say that next year we're going to go from 5 domestic violence advocates to 22. So our ability to offer services and specialized services is going to grow at an unbelievable pace next year, and I'm hopefully going to be able to send you a document to report out on what that looks like. I know sometimes sitting on this board and all the cases that you've heard, you're sometimes wondering why victims are reluctant to participate, why they don't want to show up, why they chose to make a report and then not cooperate with an investigation. So I just want to share a couple thoughts with you from my experience on what it looks like to be in the audience and what it looks like when your world really changes on a dime. First and foremost, police culture is very unique. Police officers, oftentimes that's who they are, that's who their families are, that's who their children are. And when we're filing a complaint against an officer for domestic violence, that's in jeopardy. But that also kind of messes with the paradigm of who the police are. You know, my children, I taught them, when you're in trouble, run to the police, right? Go to the police when you need help. But what happens when the person who's hurting you is the police? What happens when you live in a district where his or her buddies work in that district and that's where you're running to? So oftentimes there's that concern. Offenders groom victims and they tell them, nobody's going to believe you. Those are my friends. This is how it's handled. And they hear that over and over and over again and have every reason to believe what they're being told. Loss of the job may also negatively, even if it's temporary, may negatively impact the family in its totality. So if that officer has to go into a no-pay status, there may be no income coming into the family, there could be benefits affected, just kind of their way of life, private school, whatever's going on in that family, all of a sudden may not be happening. And that's a decision that victims often make, and many times I'll also talk to teenage children who are really angry when things like that happen. You know, I didn't do this. I'm not responsible for this. Why is this happening to me? So we've got a lot of moving parts. It's not just as simple as sitting down, I'm going to give you an address of where you can go, you know, to stay somewhere that'll be safe, or an attorney for you to talk to. There's a lot that goes along with it. There's a lot of emotional baggage. We give access to resources of low to no cost attorneys, if that's what's needed, and other types of legal services and tangible services. Some of our victims actually have to go on government assistance, and we will take them down to whatever government office that is to make that application. The other is the very credible threat that oftentimes when you have someone where being an officer is so much of who they are and they're threatened with that loss, oftentimes will tell their family members, if I lose my job, I'm going to kill myself. That's a very credible threat or idea that can be on the table, and we have to be really mindful of that, not only for the victim, but for that officer offender as well. At the end of the day, officer offenders know that they may have a lot of power and control in their home, but they know that the department has a bit more power and control than they do. And it has been my experience, my 24 years and about 10 days experience being here at CPD, that not only do we support victims, but we also do support officer offenders. And I have had many department members come to me just saying, hey, I've seen this behavior, somebody's stressed out. Are you able to talk to someone? I would love to spend 5 or 6 hours over at Starbucks, not because I have a coffee addiction, which I do, don't put it on television, but spending time talking to somebody about some coping mechanisms and things that they can do and choices that they can make rather than choosing violence. So that was my 7 or 8 minute kind of entree to officer-involved domestic violence. Do any of you have any questions for me? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have a question, and I just want to make sure I heard you clearly. And my question is the offender held accountable if the victim, you said, they choose what path, course of action that they want to be a part of? If the victim chooses not to fulfill the process, is that officer still held accountable? Meaning, is there a reprimand? Is there recommendation for counseling, therapy, or just evaporate?
Great question. Nope, does not evaporate. So responsibility for committing a crime is responsibility for committing a crime. As far as the victim being a willing participant, a witness, having some choice in decisions they're making for themselves, yes. But it's also very hard for a victim who does not want to cooperate to be sitting in on an interview and not cooperate, right? That's really difficult because we're taught to cooperate. So we sit with them in making that decision. But absolutely, department members are held accountable, just like someone in the community. We're all accountable for the choices we make.
So we've had a series of cases before the board where there's been an accusation of some kind of partner violence and the person who's the victim doesn't show up.
Yeah.
What percentage of the cases that you think would be coming to the board do the victims choose not to cooperate? Roughly. I mean,
That's tough. I became a social worker because I stink at math.
well,
Okay, but I'm gonna ballpark
yes,
it. I'm gonna
thank you.
ballpark it. I'm gonna say the percentage that show up, maybe 15%. Maybe 15%.
yeah, that's the way it feels sitting here too.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and I get that, right? And it also can be really frustrating for me because I sit there. I've been doing this work longer than I've been at CPD, and I kind of can see sometimes what things look like down the road, and it's frustrating for me. However, I've got to empower that person to make the decision that they have to live with. But this is very public. You know, tonight if the guy at McDonald's goes home, slaps his wife, McDonald's wants him flipping burgers tomorrow, and nobody knows. If one of our officers goes home tonight and commits a domestic battery against their partner, we don't necessarily want them showing up for work the next day. It's documented in a police report. There's going to be an investigation. And aspects of that could be very public.
So may I ask a follow-up question?
You may.
Thank you. For those cases where the victim doesn't choose to show up, do you ever see the pattern repeated with the same officer? Or do you frequently see the pattern repeated with the same officer?
I think without intervention and without accountability, that patterns tend to repeat, just like dieting, right? I've been on a few diets in my life. If I didn't learn from the first few, I'm back where I'm at. I'm not fatalistic in believing that there's not an answer to domestic violence, and I think with the right level of accountability and engaging persons in services, but most importantly, having a person who's willing to make change, that we can see change.
So can I hear that side of the equation? Is that something that happens through your office? You would like to spend 50 hours at a Starbucks trying to help somebody, but is there actually a process available?
So unfortunately, we can't serve offenders. What I can do is I can have an initial conversation with someone and make referrals to a community-based agency for them to get services. It really wouldn't be ethical of me, and really when someone's a domestic abuser, when they've already committed that crime, I'm not open to a conversation. But I'm more talking to people who might be stressed out in a relationship. There are services for offenders in the community, and there's actually regimented programming required by the state that can be offered and is sometimes mandated as part of a domestic violence case. It's called Partner Abuse Intervention Programming, and it's a state-certified program. There's challenges with PAPE programming, though, for police officers. The philosophy behind PAPE is, number one, is that it's in a group setting. So think about that. There's not just one for police officers. So you could be in group with someone you've arrested, or you could be in group with someone that 2 days from now, you're in an arrest situation or an enforcement situation. So that's a really dangerous situation that can come up. There's also limited ability of the PAPE programs, so they're available when most of the community's available. So if you have an officer who works first watch or works some off hours or varied days off, it might be a challenge for them to attend. We have had some success in getting some officers into some programs and completing programs successfully. There are a few individuals that offer one-on-one PAPE, but I'm not sure if that meets the state mandate, so that might be something they're just willing to do. But we definitely need another alternative for those who are wanting to make the choice to choose nonviolence.
So I have two more questions. The last one is really quick. It's just about a language you used. But to this last point, are there other police departments and other jurisdictions that actually run their own programs to support officers who have been involved with domestic violence?
There are none that exist. I've actually done the research. We've kind of traveled the country. We've looked at some other programs. I don't know one that does. Would it be ideal? It would be ideal because it would be safe space under that PAPE model to have a meeting in a group where we know we don't have offenders or future offenders in group. It's just not something that we have been able to do yet. I don't know if we will be able to at some time. I think with the advent of Zoom, and I'm not a fan of Zoom, but I have thought with the advent of being able to do these things remotely, that might be something we're able to revisit in the future.
So this is my quick question.
Okay.
Thank you for indulging me on the other questions. You referred to a new program you have, which are non-targets of search warrants. Does that
Yes.
mean somebody that a search warrant was served on who shouldn't have been a target? What does that mean?
No. So a non-target, so a recent case we had was an elderly woman whose nephew was living on her couch. The search warrant was for the nephew. It was a good search warrant, but you can imagine the trauma of the aunt when we come into her home to serve the search warrant, and especially she had no knowledge of what her nephew was involved in.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for Ms. Robinson? Well, thank you very much for your presentation, Ms. Robinson.
Thank you. And we just brought some bags with some information. Please grab it on the way out. Have a safe holiday.
Thank you. Happy holidays. We will next turn to police disciplinary cases. The police board hears cases when the superintendent files charges recommending that an officer be discharged from the Chicago Police Department for violating CPD's rules of conduct. The board, as authorized by the Open Meetings Act, has discussed in a closed meeting 2 police disciplinary cases. We will now take final action on these cases. Regarding case number 22 PB 3007, is there a motion to find Police Officer Patrick Brown guilty of charges stemming from an off-duty crash and to suspend him without pay for a period of 2 years?
So moved, Paula Wolf.
Second, Ronnie Cusack.
I will now call on the members of the board for their votes. Ms. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Block?
Aye.
Ms. Cusack?
Aye.
Ms. Dorley on the phone?
Aye.
Reverend Edie?
Aye.
Mr. Foreman?
Yeah, I need to, I'm sorry. I voted against the motion.
For the record, Reverend Edie voted against the motion. Mr. Foreman?
I also vote against the motion.
Mr. Sofakis?
Aye.
I did not participate in this case because I was not on the board when the case was in executive session. But voting in favor of are board members Wolf, Block, Cusack, Dorley, and Sofakis. Board members Edie and Foreman opposed the motion. The motion passes by a vote of 5-2, with board member Carr Favors recusing herself from the case to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest. Is there now a motion to adopt the written findings and decision and dissents that have been reviewed by all board members who participated in this case?
So moved, Paula Wolf.
Second, Ronnie Cusack.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. The second case we have on our agenda today is case number 23 PB 3028. In this case, the superintendent filed charges against police officer Michael Mancha, recommending that he be discharged from the Chicago Police Department for rule violations stemming from a vehicle pursuit. Mancha resigned from the CPD prior to hearing on the charges. With that being said, is there a motion to grant the superintendent's motion to withdraw the charges against Officer Mancha because the board no longer has jurisdiction due to his resignation from the Chicago Police Department?
Paula Wolf, so moved.
Ronnie Cusack, second.
I will now call on the members of the board for their votes. Ms. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Block?
Aye.
Ms. Carr Favors?
Aye.
Ms. Cusack?
Aye.
Ms. Dorley?
Aye.
Reverend Edie?
Aye.
Mr. Foreman?
Aye.
Mr. Sofakis?
Aye.
I also vote in favor of the motion. Voting in favor are board members Wolf, Block, Carr Favors, Cusack, Dorley, Edie, Foreman, Sofakis, and myself. The motion passes by a vote of 9-0. The written decisions of the cases on which we took final action this evening will be entered as of today's date, sent to the parties, and then posted on the board's website. There are also 2 announcements of rulings and disagreement cases this evening. Board members Wolf and Cusack will make these announcements.
I was randomly selected from the police board's membership to consider one matter on which the chief administrator of the Civilian Office of Police Accountability and the superintendent of police did not agree regarding the discipline of 4 officers. In request for review numbers 2312 through 15, the chief administrator recommended that Detective Douglas Nichols and police officers Robert Gonzalez, Manuel Leono, and Brian Bolton be discharged from the Chicago Police Department for failing to report misconduct by Sergeant Ronald Watts and officers under his supervision in 2006. The superintendent disagreed with the chief administrator's recommendation for discipline, stating that the allegations against the 4 officers were not proven by a preponderance of evidence. After considering this matter, it's my opinion that the superintendent did not meet the burden of overcoming the chief administrator's recommendation for discipline. Based on the facts and the circumstances of this matter, the amount of evidence at issue, and the many credibility determinations that must be made, a full evidentiary hearing before the police board is necessary to determine whether the 4 officers violated any of the Chicago Police Department's rules of conduct and, if so, the appropriate disciplinary action. A copy of my written opinion will be posted on the police board's website. And it was hard.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Ms. Cusack?
Yes. I was randomly selected from the police board's membership to consider one matter on which the chief administrator of the Civilian Office of Police Accountability and the superintendent of police did not agree regarding the discipline of a lieutenant. In request for review number 23-16, the chief administrator recommended that Lieutenant Wilfredo Roman be discharged from the Chicago Police Department for use of excessive force and other rule violations stemming from an incident on February 9, 2021. The superintendent did not agree that Lieutenant Roman used excessive force or that he violated Rule 1 and proposed that he be suspended for 180 days. After considering this matter, it is my opinion that the superintendent did not meet the burden of overcoming the chief administrator's recommendation for discipline. A full hearing before the police board is an appropriate next step that will allow the board to thoroughly consider all relevant evidence regarding Lieutenant Roman's conduct. A copy of the written opinion will be posted on the board's website.
Thank you, Ms. Cusack. The next item on the agenda is appeals by disqualified applicants to become Chicago police officers. When a person who applies to become a Chicago police officer is disqualified and removed from the eligibility list due to the results of a background examination, that person has a right to appeal to the police board. The board, as authorized by the Open Meetings Act, has discussed in a closed meeting several appeals. We will now take final action on these appeals. Is there a motion to affirm the disqualification decision for the following appeals? 23AA26, 23AA28, 23AA30, and 23AA32.
So moved, Paula Wolf.
Second, Michael Eady.
I will now call on the members of the board for their votes. Ms. Wolf?
Aye.
Mr. Block?
Aye.
Ms. Carr-Favors?
Aye.
Ms. Cusack?
Aye.
Ms. Dorley?
Aye.
Reverend Eady?
Aye.
Mr. Foreman?
Aye.
Mr. Safakis?
Aye.
I also vote in favor of the motion. Voting in favor are board members Wolf, Block, Carr-Favors, Cusack, Dorley, Eady, Foreman, Safakis, and myself. The motion passes. The written decisions of these appeals will be entered as of today's date, sent to the parties, and posted on the board's website. At this time, I would like to ask Superintendent Snelling to give his report.
Good evening, and good evening to everyone in attendance, our community members, our board members. I'd like to start off by thanking Aileen Robinson for her presentation. She is truly dedicated to domestic violence. I'd also like to welcome Kyle Cooper to the board here. So I'm sure you're going to do great here. What I'd like to first talk about, the men and women of Chicago Police Department and the great work that they've been doing, especially this year. In 2023, the city saw a reduction in both shootings and homicides compared to 2022. Through December 19th, 2023, there were approximately 369 fewer shootings than last year. That resulted in 86 fewer homicide victims and 576 fewer shooting victims. That's 576 less traumatic incidents and 576 less families affected, and 86 fewer families who had to deal with the loss of a loved one. These declines were driven by the department's continued efforts to protect the safety of all Chicagoans. We will keep strengthening investigations and strategically allocating resources tailored to every community area. The ongoing work of our vehicular hijacking team contributed to a 21% reduction in vehicular hijackings in 2023 compared to 2022. In addition, the organized retail crime team cleared more than 260 case reports and recovered more than $1 million in stolen merchandise. For the first time, our Family Liaison Office held several community peace walks and resource fairs for those affected by violence. The Family Liaison is a household within the Bureau of Detectives, providing support and services for the families of homicide victims. They recently performed an event at Maggie Daley Park for children from the South and West Side affected by homicides and gun violence, where they've lost family members. It was a truly successful event, and we'll be doing more of that as we move along. We're also addressing the needs and experiences of our members. This year, the department opened 2 additional employee assistant program offices, one on the north side and one on the south side, so that our officers can seek out help. As you heard earlier today, there are times when our officers need to seek out help. Standing with city leaders and community partners, we also cut the ribbon on the brand new public safety training center on the west side of Chicago. This sits on 30 acres, and the training resources and program for Chicago police officers and Chicago Fire Department evident in the training that we're providing for our officers. This is helping us through our consent decree. It is helping us reach compliance with training, which we have this year. We've reached more than 96% compliance in our training. So we're trying to stay ahead of the game with that, meeting our compliance with the consent decree. In the area of reform, the Chicago Police Department continues its work, transforming the department in alignment with consent decree goals during the 8th independent monitoring period, which ran from January 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2023. The department achieved some level of compliance in 85% in monitorable paragraphs. This sets the foundation for steady progress through policy improvement and updates. Public safety is one of the most crucial aspects of Chicago's future. I look forward to all that we will do together to enhance the future. As you see, the mayor just rolled out the People's Plan, where all of the city agencies will be working together to deal with public safety. It was a great event, and it was great to see everyone sitting on that stage pledging to make sure that everyone is dedicating their resources, their time, and their efforts to keeping the city of Chicago safe. And with that, I turn back to the police board. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Snelling. At this time, I will now ask the Chief Administrator of COPA, Ms. Kirsten, to give her report with the microphone.
Thank you and good evening. Hello to community members, members of the board. Welcome to our new board president, Mr. Kyle Cooper, and thank you to our outgoing president, Mr. Guion Foreman. It's been a pleasure to get to serve alongside of you, and I appreciate that opportunity. As I do every month, I try to give kind of a statistical snapshot of what came in and went out to the door in COPA. So for the month of November, we received 350 complaints and notifications. Of those, 72 remained under COPA's jurisdiction. Again, the highest complaint type that was retained under COPA's jurisdiction were improper search or seizure, your Fourth Amendment violations, which comprised 37% of the COPA complaints that we received. We had 3 officer-involved shooting notifications last month, and COPA also concluded 6 officer-involved shooting cases. We closed around 144 total cases, and of those, approximately 30% of our closed cases included some sort of sustained allegation. We did not have any transparency video releases last month, and I want to intentionally kind of talk about that for a moment in light of a recent Office of Inspector General report, which talked about the city and COPA, CPD, and the Office of Emergency Management, all of our compliance with the city's video release policy. Many people in the room know the history of police reform, most recently here in Chicago, was really spurred after the murder of Laquan McDonald, when videos of that incident were not made public for nearly 13 months. And it was in light of that and in the aftermath of those events that the city committed itself to robust transparency requirements by developing a video release policy that back in 2016 was pretty transformational, requiring COPA to post all videos of officer-involved shootings on our website in a transparent, consistent, unedited, uneditorialized manner for the public to receive that information along with other supporting documents, reports, case reports, tactical response reports, audio communications, radio communications, 911 calls, et cetera. Back several years ago, the Office of Inspector General did its first audit of our ability to comply with that program, and the results were mixed, I would say. And so now the Office of Inspector General has come back again several years later to its original recommendations, and we as a city, COPA, CPD, and OAMC, have been able to point to a lot of really good and successful changes, implementing and really embodying what the spirit of that policy is aimed at, which of course is consistent, unbiased transparency regarding these critical incidents. So I encourage you to go to the Office of Inspector General's website in order to read more about that specifically. Additionally, and I'll conclude with this, I really appreciated the board's inclusion of Aileen Robinson's remarks tonight. I think that's critically important given the cases that you all review and the important work that she does. She didn't have a lot of time tonight, so I want to maybe steal a little time for myself to kind of explain the way that our agency works with her and her resources and her staff. I think so often if you're not actually in the system, it may seem like we're all very siloed and disconnected, but in actuality, Aileen and the advocates that she leads have a lot of communication and dialogue with COPA investigators. If you're not familiar with how COPA investigates domestic violence and sexual misconduct cases, we have a dedicated team of individuals, special victims investigators led by a supervisor, supervised by a deputy chief, all of whom have extensive experience in domestic violence and sexual misconduct advocacy, support, social work backgrounds, investigative backgrounds, attorneys. Together, they have decades of combined experience in just this kind of work. I myself went to law school because I was working as a family violence advocate and decided I wanted to do more in order to impact change for some of our most vulnerable members of society. That's what led me to law school. That's what led me to the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, where I almost entirely focused on the prosecution of domestic violence and sexual misconduct cases. It is with that level of expertise that we come to this work. We don't take it lightly. It's an incredibly important and difficult area. I would say, and I hope we can continue to have conversations with the board, providing education and opportunity to learn more about the challenges of how to proceed when a victim or survivor is not willing or able to participate in the process. You learn as a prosecutor something that's called evidence-based prosecution in the context of a domestic violence or a sex case where the survivor doesn't want to proceed. I always thought that was a silly term because all prosecutions should be based on evidence. But what is meant behind that term is that when a survivor isn't able or isn't willing to participate, you have to be able to find what other parts of evidence can hold up in a court of law at a criminal standard, which is, of course, the highest standard beyond a reasonable doubt. Here in an administrative setting, we have a much lower burden of proof, a preponderance of the evidence, but we have the skill and ability at COPA to be able, because of our investigative staff, to be able to draw those same principles in the way that we approach building a case to come before this board in an administrative context. So I look forward to working, continuing our work, and to the extent we can continue to educate the board about how all of these city resources work together in order to try to provide the best and most just outcomes for survivors and frankly for the officers involved in these incidents. So I just really appreciate her inclusion tonight and wanted to say thank you to the board for that.
Thank you, Chief Administrator. At this point, I will now call upon members of the public who have signed up in advance to speak. And just to make sure that we have time to hear from all speakers, we'd ask that you limit your remarks to 2 minutes. And so at this time, I would like to call Mr. Matt Brandon.
Thank you. First of all, congratulations and welcome, Kyle. And then thank you again for all that you've done. Superintendent, Deputy, Sergeant, and Board, Kristen, thank you all. And I want to wish all of you all, well, I'll say Merry Christmas. If you're not Christian, then Happy Holidays. But I'll say Merry Christmas to you all. I want to say thank you for the work that you do, and Gian in particular, and Larry, the superintendent, I'm sorry, in particular.
It's all right.
Because what you've done is you've legitimized small groups like ours when we go out in the community and we try to work hand in hand with the efforts that you all do. And it would be so easy for organizations like the police department and the police board to just isolate themselves from smaller groups and just go to those groups that you see out front all the time, the people that get all the big money. So I just want to say on behalf of those groups who get out here and walk these streets, thank you. Thank you for giving us legitimization, and thank you for your participation in our efforts to work in our communities. One quick recommendation, because when we come here, we hear all the things that sometimes are troubling when concerning police officers. And I would like the superintendent to consider doing something like this when you do your department commendations and your honorable mentions. You know, those are usually done, well, in the old days at the academy, nobody would see them. There'd be a little clip on the news. But let's try to show the police officers in some of the good lights that they are in the performance of their duties. Yes, we have to deal with the bad, but we ought to honor the good. And the public ought to have the same opportunity to see them in that light that they have to see them in this light. So God bless you all. You do God's work. Thank you. Stay safe. Happy holidays.
Thank you, Mr. Brandon. Next, I would like to call June Norfleet.
For shorter people.
I understand that.
Vertical challenge. Gentle people, gentlemen, gentlewomen, and again, welcome to Board President Kyle Cooper, and again, generous thank you to our outgoing Board President, Mr. Foreman. It has been a pleasure to work with you and all of the board. I too wish you all the best of the holiday. I had some prepared comments, but Superintendent Snelling sent me on a different path today, or this evening, when he mentioned the family liaison board or group, division of the office of the detectives. Yes. Right. Working with our families, being involved at sea level, this work of governance, this is not the sunshot cloud stuff that we see. It's down here in the nit and gritty. This is it. If you're not down there in the nit and gritty, as Matt and I were today, on the corner of 72nd and South Chicago, watching the children be dismissed for Christmas holiday break as they congregate on their way to and fro, and they're going to go astray. But we're there on the corner every week, twice a week, doing the gritty work because somebody has got to get in there and talk to them on the real. Every one of you on the board, if you do not include in your regimen of serving on this board, of getting out and participating at ground level, I'm sorry. Your participation, your renderings on this board are hollow. You've got to know what you're talking about. As Ms. Christian said today, I know what I'm talking about because I did the family service social work. So I wanted to take it a step higher. Do not do this remotely. Don't phone this in. How are you going to give suggestions about situations that matter about public safety if you don't get out there and do that? Can't do it every week, can't do it every day. But please include, please be authentic in your comings and your goings and dealing with the public so that you can say, yes, I know what the police superintendent is talking about. Because I was there, I've seen what happens on the corners. Don't just roll your window up when you go past on 43rd and Halsted. Look around. Check it out. See what's going on. See what the officers are having to deal with. Thank you so much, Superintendent, for bringing that item to us today. I'm hoping that that particular unit will be expanded. We've got to deal with the family. Somebody's got to stand up and tell the truth. If we don't talk about getting help for our families so that our young people can be here and take your place and be able to serve us, we have done a disservice. Thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. At this point, it appears that all members of the public who signed up to speak have been called. But before I ask for a motion to adjourn, I'd like to echo the comments that were made by several members today and also members of the public in thanking Guion Foreman for his service for the last several years. Guion has been on the board for nearly a decade now, I think, at this point, and there isn't a room that I've been in with him where I haven't seen members of the public or elected officials come up to him and thank him for his dedicated service to the city. And I can only hope to follow in his footsteps because he's put the board on the right direction, and he's graciously agreed to stick around so that we have at least a quorum for the next couple months. So I just want to appreciate and thank Guion for his service, and just to say I hope I can fulfill your shoes, and thank you again. And with that being said, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move Paul Wolf.
Is there a second?
Second, Ryan Cusack.
Thank you. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes and we are adjourned.